Good up.
This is Channel 253.
On this episode of the Grit and Grain Podcast.
And I will say the best thing about it is if you pour a pint of NA beer for somebody that say they haven't drank in 15 years, but they're drinking NA, they don't look any different in your bar. I have had to explain this to bar owners so many times. When we first started, people would just like try to throw our beer into like a mop closet, just not give a shit about it, not realize that there are customers that want this and they want to be treated just the same.
Channel 253 is member supported. I'm producer Doug Mackey, and I hope you will show your support by going to channel253.com/membership and join. Thank you.
Welcome to the Grit and Grain Podcast, where we explore and celebrate the craft beer industry, community, and history in Tacoma, Washington, and surrounding Pacific Northwest areas. Thank you so much for hanging out. Let's get to it. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Grit and Grain Podcast, coming to you guys from Peaks and Pints in Tacoma, Washington. Woo! I know, it's only you. Are you too tired from your New Year's activity?
Yes, I'm exhausted.
Me too.
Yeah, this is January 1st, 2025. Happy New Year, everybody. We're kind of doing a special holiday episode, kick off the new year with actually a very topical, a very like current topical episode. Here as always with Ron Swarner. How's it going, Ron?
Well, it's going.
Are we all kind of tired? Actually?
Yeah. I had 4 days of inventory and then
you
spent
finished
New Year's Eve logging numbers into a computer and writing 2 outros.
Sounds like a hoot and a half.
Hoot and a half.
Hoot and a holler.
And now and I'm rewarded with NA beer.
Perfect. Bethany, how's it going?
Great. How are you guys?
Very good.
Good.
Also a little tired.
Yeah.
But it was a good New
Tired.
Year's.
Did you make it to midnight?
I did. I made it to midnight. Although I usually I have an 11-year-old, so we mostly celebrate East Coast New Year's.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, hey, if you want to stay up till midnight, you can still totally stay up till midnight. But we did our countdown at 9 o'clock, so it's fine. So we did our countdown.
East Coast.
Yeah, did our countdown, and then we watched John Wick, I think, until midnight, and then we both crashed.
Did you make it till midnight?
No, I did not.
Me neither.
By choice, but it was
Adam.
like 11:33.
Oh.
You know,
Well,
but
that's so
fireworks
close.
were going. Yeah, it's just my neighborhood.
Close
it's
enough.
insane.
Yeah.
You know, we're still in city limits, but people think we're not. You're definitely not supposed to light fireworks, but
Matt, who is this talking to us?
I know, I was going to say, well, Paige was on mic, and then I was going to say,
Jumped ahead.
yeah, the person you guys are hearing right now is Olympia's very own Aaron Blonden from 3 Magnets.
hello.
Welcome, sir.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. This is like the perfect episode for the first recording of 2025. If you guys are familiar with 3 Magnets and Aaron's work, you might have seen self-care NA beer popping up just about everywhere over the last few years. It's exploded in popularity across Washington, and as the NA category gets more and more popular, a really well-beloved, high-quality local option is getting tons of traction, as you can imagine, and it's all Aaron's work, man. Mm-hmm. You guys have created something pretty incredible down there, dude. And this month is your Super Bowl, I would imagine.
Yeah.
I've been preparing all year.
We've created our own high volume scheme that starts right at Fresh Hop. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the ones I brought to share with you, but I just don't let off the gas. So there's not a lot of Fresh Hop NA that's out there in the market.
Not
so
at
I
all.
usually make at least 4.
Wow.
It started, I think, the first year with 2. Like 4 years ago, I was like, I'll make 2. And now I'll make 4. And then it's like, should I make 6? Because the market really wants it. And that's going to direct to consumer, direct to retail. So we're in 41 states. But yeah, we're right now scheming on expanding and then getting a lot more representation in Washington.
Sweet.
Is kind of the focus.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, it feels very Washington to be the first NA brewery in Washington and then make fresh hops.
Yeah, which is awesome.
If you're already going to the farm and you've been doing that for like 13 years. It seems to fit right in.
Yeah, you might as well just just fold that right in.
And I can make one fresh hop Hefeweizen and fear if I'll sell it or not. But I can make 4 fresh hop NAs that are,
And they'll
sell
crush.
all of them.
Yeah.
Sell all of them faster than I can sell one leaded, like obscure beer style that nobody asked for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you say 40? The South Carolina is in 41 states.
Yes.
That's what I was.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It's amazing.
Wow.
Well, NA you can ship directly to consumers, and the shipping laws are very different versus as Aaron and those guys call it, leaded beer. So full alcohol beer. You can't ship that directly to consumers in most situations, and then just shipping across state lines between distributors and suppliers is really unusual. You don't have any of those red tape issues with NA beer.
Right.
Do you have an NA Pilsner?
Yes.
Oh man,
Yeah.
you should.
It seems natural for you.
That's usually like in the top 2 sales typically, and the market wants like a crispy boy in the NA market. So yeah, we usually rotate in like a German pills, a Czech pills, or the Italian style. And then I was really early on in like, let's teach the NA consumer, because it's so new, what a West Coast Pilsner is.
Yeah.
So we make West Coast Pilsners like all the time because that's what I want to drink.
Hey, side question: do you want to hang out for 2 episodes today? Because if so, have we got a treat for you?
Yeah.
Yes. I remember you going from Matchless to 3 mags, and the first fresh sheet you sent out, there was only 3 Pilsners on it.
Yeah.
Ron's like, what the fuck? Aaron, are you okay?
But it came from chain line.
That's exactly. I feel
Yeah.
like
It
it's
wasn't a
chain line
shock.
talking. Yeah.
No, there's a lot of that. I didn't know if you guys wanted to do a fuck up story, but I prepared one today. But that goes
Yes, we
back,
do.
that goes back to when I started making lager. So there was a lot of that, like, hey, can we make lager the way I want to make lager? No, at like old breweries years ago. So I couldn't do what I wanted. So when we kind of started chain lining to do whatever the hell I wanted, and I had equipment from 1997, like esoteric Czech brew house. That was like pulled out of a closed hotel in Japan. So it's just like everything on that brew house to get it going, like took a while. And I was like, I should use this equipment. And then it made the most sense to just make Czech beer on a Czech brew house. So yeah, I'm usually like not yelling, like shaking my fist, but like we have gotten so esoteric now on Czech styles, which is great, but I'm not even sure people know like what they're doing, or like there's Krusovice, the Chernay was like pretty early on. I was drinking that, and I was like, I really want to start making these like Polotomaves, Tomaves, like these more obscure Czech beers. Now I'll look, and like half of the breweries in Seattle have an obscure Czech beer on their menu. So that might have helped push the needle that direction, but we also all copy each other.
We've actually talked about that a couple of times. Is like as soon as like somebody like maybe Chainline or like Lucky does this, or if Varietal makes like a Czech dark lager, 6 other breweries have one within the next 8 weeks. Which honestly I love, because it's like they're all just a little bit different and all very like, usually they're all great, especially because all the breweries that copy each other are connected and all level each other up, and that's always awesome. But yeah, there was like a golden era for like Czech dark lager like a year and a half ago, where there was like a bunch of it available. Baltic Porter kind of earlier this year, around like April, May, there was like 7 Baltic Porters out that were all different and awesome.
I've noticed you've brought that up a lot lately. He really loves Baltic Porters.
I love Baltic Porter. Dude, Threshold is doing a Baltic Porter. Sorry, Baltic Porter side tangent. But Threshold Brewing is doing a Baltic Porter Invitational in January this month. I know I want to go so bad. One of their organizers reached out to me because they want Wander's Baltic Porter for Global Mutt, which is fucking incredible. And she's like, hey, can I get this from you? And I was like, you can't, because I can only sell it in Washington, but here's who sells Wander in Portland, and you can totally do this. But yeah, they're going to have at least 10 Baltic Porters on tap.
What's the brewery again?
Threshold.
Yeah,
cool. Who also makes a great Baltic Porter. Anyway, top three styles of all time.
So when were you at Chainline then? Was that the first brewery you were at, or when did you start?
I started like 2011. and I was hired at year 5-ish, or right before year 5-ish of Two Beers' existence. I had been in a homebrew shop, and it was like that classic story of like homebrewers finishing college, doesn't know what he wants to do for a living, and then decides like, light bulb moment. Oh my God, we're drinking my homebrew in this dirty kitchen. And this is the best beer I've ever had. So I went on a road trip for a while, and basically the Pacific Northwest, like looking for work. Like any brewery that would take me on, I was probably brewing like once or twice a week.
Oh.
And then you couldn't like sell the beer. I didn't want to get in trouble or get popped in college for doing something sketchy. So my friends would give me like the $42 it took to buy ingredients, and then I would just make a beer and then put it in kegs, and then they could have the
some,
batch
yeah.
or, you know, something like that. That seemed a lot less red tapey to allow me to brew more.
Sure.
Because I wanted to brew more than I even wanted to drink the stuff, because I was trying to build it as like a resume for doing that. So I ended up at a homebrew shop, just sheerly on brewing, and that was a blast. I met a lot of great people, and a lot of professional industry brewers have come from there.
Sure.
I won't out all of them, but like some are way up in the Georgetown organization, for instance. And so there's a lot of
Totally not Matt Edwards.
Yeah. No, it's not. No, it's not. I have a great story about meeting him, but there were a lot of talented brewers. That was in Bellingham, and the beer scene was not super busy all the way back then. It was just Boundary.
Yeah.
Rest in peace. Like, you know, that was what we had. But it didn't mean when I was getting ready to leave there that people like Dave Vitt weren't about to start Kolshin.
Oh, sure.
And he was in Olympia, coincidentally, forever at Fishtail. He was very much an equipment guy. So I lived about 2 blocks from the first Kolshin.
Okay.
And I swore that was going to be my big shot.
Yeah.
I had no experience at all. But I lived 2-3 blocks away. So it seemed like
it's
a perfect fit.
Man.
Yeah. I was like, please hire me.
Yeah.
bring him like homebrew, and he hands you like a bush.
Sure.
You know,
yeah, totally.
I found a lot of people prefer really cheap beer while they're building facilities. That seemed to be
seems to add up.
seemed to be a theme. But yeah, a road trip ensued, and then my first couple of job offers didn't feel like the right fit. I was a little nervous about moving to those locations, or it just didn't sound very promising in terms of hours I was going to actually get to afford to live there on an entry-level brewing job. But I ended up at Two Beers because my best friend snuck himself in there, and that was the guy that started homebrewing with.
Oh, cool.
So he said, hey, I need help canning tomorrow. You think you can come work like 16 hours with me? So I was down in Oregon near Casi. And drove overnight. drove all the way back to Seattle. Slept on his sofa. Then the next day it was just like, when we're talking like the most labor intensive, one can at a time. They used to make those. Now you have like rotary cans that do like 270 cans per minute. You're like, can you imagine? It took us 16 hours to do 100 cases.
Yeah. We did our first house beer there, and they were canning that day, and I got to see the action.
Oh, yeah.
One at a time.
And you got to leave whenever you wanted.
Yes.
Everything on that original canning line, because Two Beers was one of the first to do cans in Washington, everything on that can line was just manual. There was no like automation at all. Oh, yeah. So like the cans, you would grab each can individually. You would set it on this thing that had 2 fill heads. You would set the can on a shelf. It would hit a button on the back that would do like a very brief CO2 purge. Then it would start filling, and it would stop with like a foam sensor. And you would have to literally lift the can off and put it on a seamer, hit the button on the seamer.
Oh my gosh.
And then like use your other hand. So I was so coordinated. But like somebody had to like run when there was a moment to scoop more cans into like a Rubbermaid tote that was like sanitized, and it was just not even 2 years after I'd started doing that. It was so different, like canning lines had gotten way more commonplace, but still not good.
20 cases in 16 hours.
Yeah, just terrible. So automated canning lines that would fill like 4 cans at once seemed incredible.
Yeah, that was just luxury none of us plebes could afford.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was 2 beers. And then at one point, I was like, I don't know, like I could definitely try to increase my skill set, learn new things, be in a larger facility. So I
went really
interviewed at Red Hook,
Yeah.
and was brought on with like a pretty cool hiring thing that happened all of a sudden. I remember like never having a very official beer interview. You just sat around and like ate pizza and drank beer with like a brewery owner, and that was like 6 people that worked at Red Hook sitting in their pub. But that just seemed a lot more nerve-wracking.
Oh yeah, I guess.
You know, they're like,
Because it's
what
like,
have
does
you
he
done?
like me? Like,
Yeah, like please like me. So yeah, I'd taken that shot, and then they had 3 shifts. They had 5 vessels. It really taught me a lot about like the engineering side
Sure.
of brewing compared to even the brew house I have currently. It's just there was so much more potential. But still, walking in as like a shift brewer at a brewery like that, you would be like, okay, give me the rundown. And remember, I have ADHD. So it'd be like, he'd be like, okay, you got 1 mashing in. I was like, got it. And what's in the lauter ton? He's like, nothing. But you have a beer transferring from your pre-run ton into your kettle. Your kettle is about to boil. And then you have 1 in the whirlpool knocking out. And so it was just like that, just like back-to-back batches.
I hated that just now. Just
on 3 shifts.
You write it down.
It's like, whoa. And they weren't messing around. And that was definitely, they were all in hectoliter.
Yeah.
So that, after I had left there, I'd gone to chain line. And so I kind of stayed in that like metric.
Yeah.
Metric system's so great, but I'm still not the brewery. Like Aaron loves the metric system, but I still use pounds. I just can't. I can't do my hops in grams because that seems just ridiculous. And then the kilogram thing, I can't do it because I'm so good at pounds. But yeah, like everything else is just so much easier for me. I'll still speak in Plato. I can still talk liters if people want. But it was simply because that weird chainline brew house was all the tanks were in liters.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and if you have to report what you made, it was like, I made 12 hectoliters. So
They're
does
like,
that
no,
mean
we
anything?
don't know. We don't know what that means. Give it in barrels.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't, but those 50-liter kegs were still pretty prevalent, so it made sense at Chainline to like run a 50-liter keg.
Yeah.
Do you like
that makes
50-liter
sense.
kegs? I do.
I do. They're easier to lift.
Yeah, they're better size.
Yeah,
It's
but
a
the
dramatic
rubber
difference
ones,
from the half.
the rubber ones, when their handle
Those are
gives out
awful.
and you are holding one, it's not fun.
The handle.
Yeah, they just snap off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so dumb.
I've seen one roll down Pike Place. Like, think of like the steepest hill.
Charles, run!
Dude,
It's just
What?
not good.
did you say run, Charles?
Oh, no.
It just hits a car like a fucking meteorite. Like,
It's not the
Takes out
Indiana
holy
Jones.
crap. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the Indiana Jones rolling boulder, but
Right.
it's a keg that would probably somehow hurt more. Not a
Well,
big-
we actually didn't even talk about it.
Let's talk about
I know we mentioned cheap beer. Or you mentioned cheap beer when you were talking, and we didn't talk about what we were drinking. What is this?
So that is our NA lager flagship, Schurler Easiest. So it goes along with the Schurler Easy, which was kind of developed. Early COVID was our macro premium shitty lager, and I was doing that by like high gravity brewing, and then we'd make a lot for our small facility to make it make sense. Where all these dive bars in downtown Olympia at one point could not get Rainier.
Yeah.
They're like, I can't get Rainier in early COVID.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, well, if we were, $3 to $4 more a case, would you buy ours?
Yep.
And a bunch of them said they would. So once we got further into NA, it seemed to make a ton of sense to make this as the counterpart. So they're not necessarily the exact same beer. It's one that we affectionately try to use more micro malts and stuff. I tend to be that brewer that has spent a ton of time on the materials side of brewing, like doing malt sales and stuff like that. So I like to kind of tell a story with where my ingredients are from. So that kind of goes along with almost everything in this line.
Yeah.
So I have changed the barley from batch to batch. I've done some really cool stuff, some heirloom stuff that's like been grown in Oregon once. Wow. And just like hurled it at one of our NAs to just do it because, you know, no one else is going to do that. And so this, though, is meant to kind of just like unplug and be that shitty NA that you want in the best sense.
It's
Totally.
so
In the
not
best
shitty.
sense.
It is
Dude,
so
it's actually
good.
great.
It's not. It's not
love
shitty at all.
You know,
the noble
so-
hop character is like punches you in the nose. It's really good.
Because if we take it
very
way back, the first beer I ever had wasn't a beer. It was a near beer.
Oh, really?
And I won't out the friend, but they would let us take like a 6-pack of NA beer into the trailer. We didn't realize it wasn't, you know, the trailer was like literally in the driveway.
Yeah.
And we could just hang out in the trailer. They'd run electricity to it, like put a movie on and drink near beers in there at like 14. Like that was the coolest thing in the world. So there's a lot of fun rules that we can get into, but we've just learned along the way with NA that like, how old do you have to be to drink one? So we 16, and that can sound weird. And we've thought about leaning on to 18, and Europe's very different, but we just affectionately say it's not our mission to groom people.
Oh, word. That's a good way to put that,
especially
actually.
when drinking can be like a national crisis. We just don't try to groom people into drinking.
Right.
You know, they don't need to learn that the only way they can socialize is like going out and drinking.
Sure.
At a young age. So yeah, we will card people if they look very young.
Yeah.
Buying them, but this kind of has a place because it's something that someone might expect. Like,
Yeah,
let's
totally.
say like somebody quits drinking, then a couple weeks later they're like, man, I mean, I used to drink a 30 rack a day. If it was that type of person, then they could maybe identify with this, but maybe that would set off like triggers if they don't want to do it. So the thing we always tell people with NA is there are 100 plus use cases. I mean, it's just infinite.
Yeah,
The
for sure.
reasons and the stories that people tell about how they found us.
Yeah.
And why they found us. So it's a lot of beer drinkers that just want to rotate. You know, it's like, oh man, the game's on and I'm out at the pub and I had 3 IPAs.
Right.
And you can now have an NA IPA. You know, you can kind of rotate that in. So people are using it as a tool. Some people don't drink at all. Pregnant women love it. I've had a lot of friends that were expecting and drank during their entire pregnancy.
Drink this.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry. It's so commonplace. Yeah. But so ours have to be under 0.5% alcohol. And then most of them can be anywhere from like 0.09 to 0.35% alcohol. So it's just kind of like what we've learned. Even when we get into that really big barley wine, that's NA.
Yeah,
You know,
which
it
is
doesn't
so
mean
funny.
it was necessarily any higher ABV than the rest of them. It's just meant to kind of taste like that. So if you take kind of like what I've done over the years and brewing at all these like great places, it's kind of allowed me the last like, let's say 7 years to just be very innovative and just kind of follow the industry, make what I want to make. And the places that have put 0 restrictions on me, Nate and Sarah at 3 Mag have gotten better results out of me because I wasn't told like, you can't make that much NA beer. How are we ever going to get rid of it? Like
Yeah.
that was literally the conversation that happened. Like they bullied me into making one before. Like come around, we were in maybe August 4 years ago, and they wanted to do Sober October.
Yeah.
And I had brought it up. I had been trying, you know, everything. So like, I'm not ashamed to say Athletic kicked the door open.
Sure.
And so I was trying those. I was trying the other ones. I was like, I don't think that's like, I don't know, that's not current beer as an NA option. And I think I know nothing about it, but maybe I can make a better product. And so it essentially kind of turned into, can we make something like more exciting, more current, and do it? And Nate and Sarah said, can you do it in under 2 months? Shit. I was like, no, I haven't even tried it.
Yeah. I'm throwing shit at the wall, guys.
How did you meet those two?
Oh, man. I met them originally in Washington, D.C. at the Craft Brewing Conference, and we were at the bar called Sovereign.
Just like you.
And there were a couple interesting things there. They were sitting with two people that I vaguely knew, and because one of them was one of their brewers, Jeff Stokes was sitting with them.
Yeah.
I kind of figured they would be a part of 3 Meg, and I grew up around Lacey, Olympia, so I had gone in there a lot and had known Pat as well.
Oh,
so
sure.
I'd kind of been around that area, but our brewery has been around 10 years. So I grew up there. It's not been there the entire time.
Yeah.
But when I had run into him at Sovereign, I sat down at the bar. I looked at the list, and it was just a massive list because it was a CBC. So I think the first 6 beers I tried to order, they didn't have. They were not available. And it was just the brewer's beer, I was let me try this Saison from it's nope.
All the beer nerds
all the other
out.
brewers had ordered the exact same thing.
Totally.
If there was something less exciting, it probably would have been available.
Yep.
But after a bunch of those, I'd given up, and they had a Jester King snorkel was on the menu. And I was like, there's no one besides me appreciates this mushroom beer. I'm going to order that. So I ordered that. And then we were sitting down, and I think they had gone through a tear of a bunch of fancy bottles, so they're Cantillons.
Oh, sure.
And then of course everybody likes to drink Pilsner while they're drinking all these things. But that was kind of when I met them, and they loved telling the story of my humor didn't come across right away. I was very dry and sarcastic. And at all these conferences that I've gone to over the years, they always want to give you free stuff to make you that future customer of theirs, and they were just hell bent on giving us blood orange syrup. This is way early on the curve too. This is before Barry made this print money for his brewery and stuff. This is years ago, and they're like, "Hey, blood orange syrup. What can you do with this 1.5 liter bottle?"
Yeah,
it's not much, and I'm not going to check it to bring it back. So I had joked with them, and they didn't know me. I was like, I'm just going to go near the trash cans at CBC, and I'm just going to grab all these bottles. I'm going to check 3 suitcases and take it back. I'm going to make a batch of blood orange IPA, and the cogs, I'm halfway there. I didn't buy the syrup.
Marge is going to be so good on this beer.
Because I love to poke holes at stuff like that, but there's a lot when you're on both sides or when you're on the brewing side, something that you won't notice. You'll notice breweries releasing fruited beers and stuff. We're buying 48 pounds of syrup at once, and it's super expensive to ship that. Because it weighs even more, too. It's thick. It's got a ton of viscosity. Imagine glugging it into a tank. It's terrible. And I don't tend to do a bunch of that, but I do know from breweries is you can't just order 6 of those.
Yeah.
You got to get 2,000 pounds of them.
Yeah.
So
To make it
I
actually
guarantee you
cost-effective.
that's why the market just overnight was breweries doing 7 different fruited options. You're like, why are they doing this? They were just making their cogs
Palette.
line up.
Yeah.
It's making it very cost effective
Right.
to give you this much option. And we love options.
True.
We love it.
My CBC visit was passion fruit syrup.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That
It was Amaretti.
But it was a smaller bottle. It was Amaretti.
Of course it
Passion
was.
fruit.
Yeah.
Pretty sure I still have it. We have to take a super quick break. However, we do have some barley wine-ish beer to pour in a second here. So hang out for just a minute. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Channel 253 host Eric Hanberg, and I want to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Indigenous Voices podcast from Fort Nisqually Living History Museum, located in Point Defiance Park. If you haven't heard it yet, the podcast brings forward Native voices to tell Puget Sound history. The starting point is the Puget Sound Treaty War, an armed conflict between the U.S. military, local militias, and the tribes involved in the Medicine Creek Treaty. The podcast features new dialogue between the different communities impacted by the Puget Sound Treaty War and its aftermath, which is still being felt today. The work for this podcast began 3 years ago when Fort Nisqually brought together a panel of historians to discuss the legacy of the Puget Sound Treaty War with representatives from the Muckleshoot, Nisqually, Puyallup, Steilacoom, and Squaxin Island tribes. The Indigenous Voices podcast grew out of that award-winning program and has expanded to include discussions around the evolution of Native affairs throughout U.S. history. For many listeners, me included, the podcast has been a whole new angle on one of the most important events in state history. By centering tribal voices in the telling of Puget Sound history, the tribal knowledge and expertise really comes out. The Indigenous Voices podcast is available at fortnisqually.org and wherever you get your podcasts. My thanks again to Fort Nisqually Living History Museum for sponsoring this episode.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for hanging out during the break. As always, a quick shout out to Doug, our wonderful producer.
Thanks, Doug.
And to Chris for putting us on video. Thanks, homie.
Chris.
And yeah, if you guys haven't yet, please go check us out on YouTube. We're posting videos pretty much every single week and doing audio files of old episodes, which is awesome. But please do go subscribe and comment and all of that stuff. We're hoping that more people catch the podcast this year. It's one of our resolutions. And then actually, if you guys didn't see, we started up a little Patreon page. If you guys want to get a little bit more involved, you can go check us out at Patreon/Grit and Grain Podcast. And there's all kinds of cool perks. And if you just feel like buying us a beer once a month, you can totally do that too. All right. So we have barley wine in front of us, although you can't call it barley wine. So it's called gnarly wine.
Yeah. WHINE.
All right. So how did this come about?
Well, if you look at everything made in the NA space, I think it's normally done at a really large scale, and it might be considered a downstream product.
Okay.
So when I say that, I mean, let's say your brewery made 200 barrels at a time, and the market flattened out, and you wanted to pull 50 barrels out of that at any given time and run it through like a membrane filter. Now you could pull the alcohol out of that, pasteurize it, package it. You could have essentially an NA version of your main product.
Right.
But those breweries that are doing that are at a very large scale, so they can't follow small scale stuff, and they're situated to do exactly that. Whereas our goal is to create an NA beer that's meant to be a style that is fermented. Just it has to be fermented under 0.5, and then we release those. So they're an intended product.
Interesting.
So I always say they're not a downstream product.
Yeah.
And that might not make sense to some. It's not as profitable. So that's why we're trying to expand, right? But it is how you can make something like seem hyper-focused on what it actually tastes like.
Yeah, so everything is just intentional, basically.
Yes.
Like here are the characteristics I can try to achieve from this style, obviously with these parameters set up for NA beer. Honestly, the thing, I mean, like, it's paler than a barley wine, but the thing that hits me like a brick is like, it's pretty full-bodied.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. And actually, Doug just asked a great question on the break, is like caloric difference between like leaded beer, as you call it, and NA beer. For something like this that's like pretty full-bodied, like, I don't know, I imagine it's maybe still comparable because it seems decadent. Yeah. So what would you say like the normal kind of caloric difference would be between it, or is there a difference?
There's definitely a difference. They're definitely lower. But it's because like if you're throwing the sugars and starches and your goal is to make alcohol, if you're trying to make a bunch of alcohol, you're throwing more at it. And that's not the goal of these. It's to make flavor. So it's kind of like an exercise in proving how much flavor you can make without the alcohol. Yeah, even though that brings so much to the product.
Right.
You know, I was a bit nervous about releasing this one because I make maybe a barley wine every year. Maybe. and I like making them. I love making like old stock ales and like beers that are honestly pretty challenging to sell. So when I wanted to make something like this, it was the idea, like we kind of laugh at or poke fun when we brought out our double IPA before this.
Yeah.
Was like, hey, just drink it. If you know our product line, it'll immediately make sense. So it's got way more body than something we do in the smaller space that's meant to imitate like an ESB. So we have a beer called Fuzzy Hat that we bring out once a year. And like Josh Knoll, the Chicago Tribune, just lost his fucking mind about that, which is super cool.
Yeah, that's
because
amazing.
like his basically comment was, this is so good, I can't tell it's NA. And who else is making like ESBs and like obscure stuff like that. And it's that like scale. It's breweries are focused on what's going to sell on grocery shelves. And that's where they're going. And that's where we need to go to get more recognition for our brand. But it's not what we're doing. And it's not what we've done all along. It's just like we're trying to do both things at the same time.
Sure.
So if you can sell in 41 states, those customers don't necessarily want that like everyday beer on a shelf. They're probably more interested when we do an NA double IPA with 150 pounds of Roy Farms CTZ and Cascade. So that was one of the ones that we did.
Yeah.
The Freak Flag that was here had 300 pounds of Crosby Farms, which is in Oregon, their Strata. And I love that hop.
Dude, it's
in that beer.
Like, so we just, for anybody who, we didn't talk about it, but we just drank the hazy NA IPA, and it still has tons of hop character.
Yeah.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
wild.
Yeah.
Strawberry, coconut, like
Seriously.
And like everything, I put so much thought into it, and it's just like, I hope the customer gets it, right? If you pull up, like, I try not to look. It'll kill you as a brewer if you look at your Untapped. But like the most recent check-in that we have, somebody drank one of our NAs, and it's like a stellar. It's that fresh hop Kolsch.
Cool.
And that has it's Adina from Roy Farms.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, there's a bit of this, like, as a brewery, you just kind of get to know a hop and you memorize its number, and then they're like, we put a name on it, and it's like, I don't know the name.
Yeah. No, we're crushed now. Start saying that.
Oh, I hated that. Yeah,
I know. There's so many brewers who don't like it.
well, it's all these things like, oh, we blended two yeasts together, and we're going to call it, like, Citrus Smasher Slammer, and it's like, I don't want to, like, okay, so I throw that in there, and that works, you know? So I mean that's part of the design too. Is I have all kinds of stupid like mantras, but like just to make a fruity beer, like really good hop artists that you guys like, you know, like Single Hill and stuff like that. You have to put hops behind something like Strata that emphasizes what Strata is not.
Yes.
Like that Strata is like, I don't know, honeydew and menthol, and it's so interesting, and you have to put something that's like piney or something behind it. And
to reinforce what Strata is.
And considering every brewer hates all their beers, we love every other brewer's beers.
Sure.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh my God. I've just been bouncing ideas off of brewers for years about stuff like that. You can take so much more from that, and I try to put a little bit of that into stuff that I'm doing in the NA space.
So I love this actually, and this like to me, and this is like how I kind of describe your stuff to people who haven't tried it. And I'm curious if you agree with this like assessment is like, because there is like we've talked about like Athletic and other like there's other big popular kind of NA beer brands, but they seem to be targeting people who just are looking for a good NA option and maybe don't necessarily come from like the craft beer drinking community. It seems like you are intentionally making beers that people who come from craft beer will be like, shit, this is like as interesting as it could be, or as close maybe as it could come to this thing I used to love. Do you feel like you are targeting like the audience that you've always played to as a craft brewer?
Possibly. And I think there's a difference now. We're finding a lot of like random data about who the NA drinker is. So that's like the 4 years of doing this has led me to do more Nielsen data IRI data,
IRI
like
stuff,
stuff that I normally never paid attention to. But the top 15 SKUs in NA right now, they're all like Pales, IPAs, and Pilsners. And now that like their Cerveza-esque has started to get into that. So like Easiest is a good example. Like that could kind of make it into there, but people know Corona.
Yeah.
And so when Corona says, hey, we've made an NA option, which I don't think that those brands are like making some token effort at doing it.
Right.
You know, they're like Heineken and Corona. It's just like, I don't try to make exactly Heineken or exactly Corona. That's why we kind of go the more premium route, the craft route, because we also want to do that.
Sure.
So it might find the right consumer. Sometimes it doesn't. We're just there for all the reaction that we get from the people that find it. So especially since right now, the last few years, it's been predominantly Washington and Oregon. So I had some fun discovery in Oregon. We've been sending down stuff ever since I showed up at 3 Mags like 5 years ago. And the NAs have been going down there the whole time.
Yeah.
And some of the market feedback we got just told me like what we're doing randomly was the right thing. So we made all kinds of back and forth about 16 ounce, 12 ounce. But on the shelf in Oregon at New Seasons, for instance, we're the highest valued NA because we're in the 16.
Oh,
and
sure.
everybody else is playing with 12s.
Yeah.
So in a single can spot, at a spot that just sells like a single can and not a 4-pack, our value to them is worth like a couple $1,000s more a year than selling singles of Athletic, who is at the top of this market.
Right.
So it's really just us trying to like right size our volume, get more in that market, and I don't know, keep making the great product we're doing, just get it out to more people.
Sure.
Essentially.
Well, you've mentioned a couple of times, and
But calories. We got to go back.
Well, yeah,
because I do that.
you said it's
Yeah,
it's a little less.
So it's a little less, and I hesitate to put exact numbers on it, and we are moving towards that data. So in Olympia, if folks don't know, because there's not too many like full-blown beer education, get your degree programs. There's not a ton, honestly. Right. So you can go to Siebel in Chicago. You can go to UC Davis in California. You can do some stuff with OSU, but South Puget Sound Community College, as crazy as it sounds, years ago, which is right when I moved to Olympia, they started a craft brewing and distilling program. And so I got involved. I love the idea of teaching, and the students like me. It's hard to do all those things at once. I was juggling 3 jobs at one point.
Sure.
So it's just like, would love to do that and keep adding value. My whole idea to try to get involved is to make sure that the right people are kind of like knowing where to go, like where their path is in beer. Because the program that I went through, the best placement that people got was labs. After go to these huge breweries that are like, we've got a hemocytometer, you know, we got a microscope over there, so I guess you could count some cells, but we don't have much else.
Every UC Davis grad.
Yeah.
They're all at Sea
So
They're all at Sea Pine.
so what? When you said how many calories, we're getting there because that school, South Puget Sound, and even like a couple weeks ago, the head of their lab I've been working with for quite a while now on doing our ABVs. We can plate stuff, so I can plate for pathogens.
Cool.
We can do all kinds of crazy stuff. It's been fascinating. And
in that tight little brew house.
Well, at the
school,
school,
at the school, smaller.
well, at the school's facility.
The school's
so high end lab. Like I do not have that stuff.
Yeah.
But it's really close. It's nearby. They've kind of become an ally for that, and I can get into more research. So like when you had mentioned NA being on tap, that's the first thing that people ask me. It's so new to the market that you'll see like. I know for a fact we beat Athletic to releasing stuff on draft, but it's only sold in our bar, and it's on tap, and we clean the lines all the time, and it doesn't leave, and it's in a Dolium keg. It's in a Dolium keg, so it's not going anywhere. I'm not giving it to anybody that's like, hey, we just had like a Brett Pilsner on, and then we want to pour. You know, like, I can't take that risk. So beer.
So what's a Dolium keg? I've never heard of
like a single use.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
It's a great plug for my provider, which they get mad.
Awesome.
I don't even think I buy Doliums. I think I buy
Just curious. Okay.
They're terrifying for that, but they're a single use. It's not seen beer. It's not seen some wild sour thing. That's a great joke that I've got because I inherited a brewery that Stokes and Pat Jansen had both brewed at, who were way into that side, the wild fermentation, and I don't do that stuff, like at all. So I had to nuke everything when I showed up. You know, I was just like,
just walking around the brew with a fucking flamethrower, like just sanitizing everything. Everything that made Helsing great will fuck up all the beer I want to make.
Yeah. So like, you'll see great photos. Like Barry at Lucky is a great follow, but he's got this like caustic jet pack, and it's like, please just bring that down.
I know.
Like, just bring that down here.
Looks like a Ghostbuster.
But obviously, I'm being a smartass, and we've been making NA beer for 4 years with no problems. So there are things that you need to follow and you need to take serious. So that's where I became cagey when we first started doing it. Not because like, oh, I got $1 million idea. It was a little bit of that, but it was also, let's protect people, because this is serious when you're making something like this, because they're low alcohol. So the big breweries want all the NA producers to own all the really expensive equipment. A cheap pasteurizer is like $160,000. Like a cheap one. That will literally just plug into like a Goose canning line. Okay, so now that Goose canning line, I haven't taken on a quote for that in a while, but that's probably like 200. So you're looking at something that you can't afford to do, and especially if you're like, oh, I'm a passionate like NA home brewer, and I want to start a brewery. Like, it's going to be so expensive for you to buy that, because I didn't even mention the reverse osmosis filter if you want to go that route. So all the companies that are publishing stuff about the NA space are like ABV technology, which is cool because they've invented this technology, but that doesn't. That's blowing by everybody else that's already in the space doing research like me, just frantically looking for web journals like, what IBUs does Listeria die at?
What is it? Did you find that information?
Wow.
What is it?
Yeah, it's like 4.
Oh, sweet. Good to know.
Not very high.
So I'm so safe.
So you have to know those, because those are kind of a fear tactic that these larger breweries are doing. So when Athletic wanted to do draft, and we were already doing it, their draft came out. I realized it was the exact same thing as ours, just looking at a photo of it. It was single-use kegs, and it had a huge caution sticker on it. That caution sticker said you cannot keep it warm stored for more than 72 hours, which meant that they pasteurize in the can. Their pasteurizer cannot pasteurize a keg. Like, they're never going to tell me what they're doing, but it's been detective work the last few years with all these NA breweries as to figuring out what they're doing. That's like the first silver bullet I've had where I like, oh, okay, I knew they were doing that. I knew it. So yeah, we choose to do it our way. They're hopped up. They're low pH. You have to, it's just like tomatoes. Everybody knows that. You got to get under what to can tomatoes?
2.6, 3.5.
You're just throwing numbers out.
I have no idea.
I only ever can peaches, not tomatoes. What is it?
Okay, so for beer, you got to get under 4.7, right?
I said tomatoes.
You got to stay. Well, I think it's the same for tomatoes. I shouldn't say that, but it's the same. It's the same principle. Like, you have to monitor that, because that will inhibit microbe growth. And so the same thing happens with, now you put hops in the product, and then the product also has trace amounts of alcohol. So when it comes to like a national scheme of getting it on tap, I still don't think it's very viable. And there are some breweries that are at larger facilities that are figuring out how to pasteurize a keg, and then they're releasing it. But that still doesn't match like draft line cleanliness. That's the problem.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to plug?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a problem. It's a problem. So
Totally.
it's a scarier problem too when you're dealing with the NA. But the demand is there, and I will say the best thing about it is if you pour a pint of NA beer for somebody that say they haven't drank in 15 years, but they're drinking NA, they don't look any different in your bar. I have had to explain this to bar owners so many times. When we first started, people would just like try to throw our beer into like a mop closet, just not give a shit about it, not realize that there are customers that want this and they want to be treated just the same. And that's what people are starting to realize now is like, if they give you a can of the NA and it's athletic, chances are, because it's everywhere, you've seen it before, and you're going to know that person's not drinking. But the stigma of people not drinking, it goes beyond like Sober October, Dry January.
Sure.
Those are huge months for people to dabble. So we like to try to polish the amount of products that we have for those months, and we do get an uptick in sales, but it's a year-round endeavor. People want to not drink all year round.
Exactly.
So that early on, like us tippy-toeing into this, that first Sober October, brewery owners messaging me like, you're taking money out of my pocket. And it's like, that's such a slippery slope. I mean, I'm hours away with traffic, let's be honest. And how do you know what customer is buying our stuff?
Yeah.
It could be there could be no overlap in that Venn diagram, man. Like you just don't know because, like you said, they don't look any different.
No, they don't.
So that's such an interesting. That's like a great perspective.
Yeah, it's one of the best things. So when we do draft, you definitely can't tell.
Right.
And so it's things that I've had a lot of people like, I'll clean my tap line like every keg. It's like, we're not gonna make money doing it. It's a nightmare. It sounds cool, but another big thing that I kind of had was a commitment to it not pouring at the same spot, because being a sleepy bartender is a real thing. Like imagine today and having a bar with like 60 plus taps, and 2 of them are NA, and you accidentally give someone the wrong beer once you poured it, because they look the same. And so that's another step that we take, is we pour it off in the hall almost. We made a conscious effort to walk all the way over there.
That's that's such an interesting point.
Yeah.
So I would never think about that.
Future expansion has talked about things like for our crowdfunding is buying really nice glassware, but we also don't want to single anybody out. So we've been trying to do this feedback loop the whole time. It's like we don't, you can take your own time to say where you are with drinking, your relationship with drinking.
Crowdfunding medium?
Our medium is Start Engine.
Okay.
So they had approached us, and if you know the Copperworks folks, Copperworks had gone through that, and we've always had kind of a back and forth relationship with Copperworks, especially, I've done some gin barrel stuff from them, and it's a huge waiting list if you want anything. They give you great barrels.
I'm sure.
Then you make stuff, and that relationship has lasted for years. Like Nate's got a really good relationship with them. They have done multiple crowdfunds on that, like micro investments.
That's so cool.
So they essentially took our brand and the multiplier that exists kind of in the industry based on your sales numbers and chopped us up where we're trying to crowdfund $1 million at a 20% investment. So they put a valuation on us at $5 million, which sounds insane, but it's not unrealistic due to what the market can do with that if you make all the right decisions.
Right.
So, and we're trying to do all those like right now. Juggling multiple new distributors and huge lucrative potential opportunities where it's like, oh my God, can I make enough even now? So we've essentially kind of got a co-packer relationship going. The T's and the I's on the paperwork are not signed still, making me want to rip my hair out. So I'm flooring it at our brewery and making sure we have enough product going into this month, because we're trying to kick the door open, get more shelf data, and finally start taking back the shelf space that we frankly deserve for innovating this song.
Mm-hmm.
And it was
local.
pretty, it being local.
Yeah.
Like that sense of local is it's just been like the 13 years of brewing has been like local. And then I would moonlight and sell stuff at Beer Junction, and everybody has a different definition of local.
Sure.
You know, and like you can't know what someone's definition is, but for me, I was like, Yakima, that's local. You know, but like once it would be Oregon, I'd be like, that's kind of local. Pacific Northwest. So it's just really hard to have that, but there's fewer entities in the NA space. So it seems like one of the best areas to make it would be Washington and Oregon. Like get in the Pacific Northwest where we've got the ingredients and you can do it.
Yeah.
Essentially.
And the audience is there.
Sure.
Before Ron takes us out, it sounds like you had prepped a fuck-up story.
All right, Grit and Grainers, I'm Sean Jackson, and I fuck up all the God-blessed time, as we all do. So, please do regale us with your fuck-up stories.
When I was back at Two Beers, I got my first experience with contract brewing for another brand. You know, and it's been something that I've always kind of looked back on because it was a huge startup. So it was Church Key. So if you remember the steel cans, they were flat, completely flat on the top and the bottom. And you had to have the church keys to open one. Is everybody like that triangle punch? And the cool thing was you put one hole on one side and one hole on the other, and you could just gravity chug those things.
Yeah, totally. Just shotgun them so easy.
But canning lines were so new. They were also not very refined to run old, archaic can technology through.
Yeah.
So a couple companies, I won't throw them under the bus, who were like, hey, we got it figured out. And I had been brewing at Two Beers and wanted a shot at that. So I wanted to brew more of that product, which meant I had to brew more of it. I had dabbled in filtering cider, mead, and wine back in Bellingham, and they bought a filter from Alejandro of like Big Al's. And I was like, oh shit, I've never filtered beer. So he kind of showed me. So next thing you know, I was like doing like 60 or 90 barrel batches and trying to run them through one plate and frame. And any brewer would be like, no, how long does that take? 6 hours, 7 hours? If you clogged it, you had to start over. So it was not a great thing. We had to transfer them, but then all that beer would get packaged. And so when we were packaging it, we were having crazy things like the fill head once fell off during pallet. And I didn't notice for like 13 more cases that it was missing its fill head. And it was just like a stainless steel tube.
Yeah.
And like they're already packed up. And it was that thing of like looking at a pallet with at least like 50 cases on it. And just like now opening all of these like fully enclosed cardboard cases that had a slit to hold the church key on them.
Yeah.
It was like shaking can after can. Luckily, somebody found it. Somebody found it like right away.
Yeah.
So we'd get back going and run that. But it was this thing where that beer was going everywhere. I had no idea where it was going. And we were doing huge batches of it. But I had to make a lot of it. And we had to do multiple turns to make it work. And I had literally had a week where I had to transfer a ton of it. I couldn't get all in the bright. It clogged. And I had left, let's call it an unknown amount in the bottom, but in my head, it was like 7 to 12 barrels, I remember. But I mean, we were playing with 60s.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's
so I was like, and so the next like a couple days later, I was supposed to do a couple turns, and so I was brewing and went back into the brewery, and at the time there was no fermenter for me to fill. There was one dusty, dirty fermenter on the outside that had come in for this expansion that was not hooked up to glycol. And so I didn't have anybody to talk to, so I just dumped the unknown amount in the cone of one tank down the drain.
Oh, no.
Like I knew what I was doing, but I was making that decision for the beer.
Sure.
As soon as the ownership showed up, they said, our guy is going to plumb that to glycol today.
Oh,
and I was like, really? While I'm brewing 2-3 batches to fill it? It didn't make sense to me. But I had learned, like, I didn't communicate with them. I made that decision. I got put on brewing probation.
Oh, no. Wow.
Such a bummer.
It's pretty early on in my career. It's pretty early. I'd never had anything like that happen to me again, but I've been lucky the last few years as I kind of make those decisions. So if that decision were to happen, it would be me. I'd never put another brewer in a situation where they didn't know what tank they were supposed to fill.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not all you
This is
right
not
there.
all you.
That's- yeah.
100%.
No, but it was like everything about that project had so much potential, but it felt so rushed. So the cans got further down the market, and I probably can't tell you everything about that, but people were getting cans that had red interiors for the beer, and it was a Pilsner, so like there was something going on. But the can liner was thrown under the bus for failing from the can manufacturer.
Yikes.
The can definitely couldn't handle the inert gas loss. So the best thing about a can is the dome on the bottom is what houses. You go through all those pressure changes. So if you have like a 2.6 volume product and you were to warm that can up and it needs to expand, that's what keeps the can from blowing up. So our flat cans on the top and bottom that were made of steel were turning into footballs.
Oh, yeah, they're lemon shaped by the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Kind of
so-
sounds like the moral of the story is that Church Key was a fuck up beer.
I mean, it could. But there were a lot of people behind that. An Entourage star was behind that, if you remember that.
I do.
Yeah.
And it was a big deal. I did meet him a couple times, but it was really a product that like kind of set me off on my career because it was like this thing was, hey, you're making this like super romantic beer. I was like, okay, cool. What is it? And they were like, it's all Gambrinus Pilsner and Saaz hops. And I was like, okay, no mineral, no pH checks, no like all these other things that you should be doing. It was not, and it was such a good beer, and it was ridiculous that it was good, but people weren't getting it in good representation because canning was early, so they were oxidized, or the can liner was failing, or it was a football, or the packs would go out without the Church Key on them.
Oh, jeez.
The first pallet of openers that we got to open the cans, shipped from overseas, they didn't even work. They had to polish them, like sharpen them all on an angle grinder. So, I mean, like,
Great.
it's the best thing to go back and think about how beer can never do what you expect when you show up, especially if you run a facility. It's just there. You have to have like some sense of humor to handle all the stuff that's going to go sideways all the time.
That's a good point.
Like
Indeed.
everything that that can happen. So does that mean you should invest in us? Yes.
So anyway, go check out our start engine.
Gone through all the
Because
bumps. Got it all
I
worked
promise
out.
you, I've seen people dry hop the wrong tank. I've seen people transfer two beers together that were not supposed to be transferred together. I've seen people do steep with like tea and souring agents and put that into the wrong tank. Like it just stuff like that can
Wrong
happen.
yeast. Harvesting wrong yeast.
Harvesting, that would be terrifying. Yes, harvesting the wrong stuff and putting it into a tank, or not having any yeast to get through your brew day, and that's part of it too. That helps with the locale. Is everybody around wants to be so helpful in beer, especially if we just say the Puget Sound area. We extend it. We're talking Tacoma all the way up to Seattle, is if you needed something, there are definitely people that are trying to network to help you. Mm-hmm. They don't want to see, nobody wants to see anybody else fail.
Yeah.
And they want to see you do good, whether they'll tell you how much success they want you to have. Outwardly, they might not say. But yeah, that's kind of the entire narrative that we've had when we've been doing NA, is it's just like, this absolutely saved us during COVID, having something else to focus on, and every other intention that we never vocalized to people, like, hey, we're not in Tacoma and Seattle. Those shelves are really crowded. We can focus on this NA thing that we're doing over here and kind of build that, so we're not taking tap handles away from you. We're not taking shelf space away from you. So everything had kind of turned it into what was once like a production output brew pub, turned it back into a brew pub. Then we had closed our kitchen, and now we're smart enough to know that we're raising money because we want to do production externally and make more money, but still have that community sense that people can come to. Like, I would love to put self-care tap rooms in Tacoma, in Seattle. Like, I think that has a ton of merit, but we're just trying to get those steps to get there right now.
I'll shoot.
Well, much success.
Yeah.
Seriously.
So, yeah, so they can go on startengine.com and you can just type in self-care NA and you should be able to find it. And we've been hovering on the homepage, and that's really been like Nate and Sarah's dynamic. They've spent so much time and energy on this because this felt like the right pathway. We did try to go private equity. It just felt like going into a Shark Tank room, you know, and just getting absolutely bullied by somebody that even didn't have the money sometimes. They weren't even the people with money. They were like, oh, you need to do all this. You need to change your brand. I don't think it resonates with people. And like self-care seems like the perfect thing for a brand. It's just not assuming. And it resonates with everybody. Yeah.
All right, Grit and Grainers, email us at cheers@gritandgrainpodcast.com with your comments, opinions, and New Year's Eve or New Year's resolutions. Did you make any this year? Resolutions to get you through, to sustain your karmic energy, to act as Viagra for your flaccid spirits. Not speaking here of the quit the smoking, nicer to the street takeovers type of resolution, but by the way, this year you need to dig deep, get visceral, recommit, reconnect, yank hard. We read and drink everything we receive, and we try to respond as fast as we can, if not online, then on air. You can subscribe to Grit and Grain on YouTube, Apple Music, Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio, and Stitcher, and please leave us a review. Also, check us out on channel 253 and gritandgrainpodcast.com. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube for episode notes, beer news, and excuses to bail on dry worry, such as, it's freaking winter. NA beer is fine and dandy, but barley wine is needed to combat ice storms, cold drizzle, frozen potholes, or anything else the winter season throws your way. With a snifter of barley wine wrapped in your hands, the world is less bleak. With 2 snifters of barley wine in your hands, you feel joy, like you just drank the juice from a raw unicorn heart through a tube made of porcelain hummingbird skulls. A 3rd snifter of barley wine, you may find yourself outside in your underwear throwing punches at the snowflakes. Clearly, barley wine equals good winter fun. If this podcast is not what you expected, please alter expectations. Why didn't the whistleblower go outside during the winter? He was snowed in. No such thing as a bad time to visit Tacoma. No such thing as too much barley wine. Tune in next Friday for more sweet chatter. Cheers, everyone, and Happy New Year.
Cheers. Aaron.
Happy New Year's. Thank you.
Oh my God. Thanks again for tuning in. Don't forget to follow us at Grit and Grain Podcast wherever you get your social media and catch new episodes every Friday. Cheers.
Channel 253 is member supported. I'm producer Doug Mackey, and I hope you will show your support by going to channel253.com/membership and join. Thank you. Grit and Grain is part of the Channel 253 podcast network. Check out our other shows: Nerd Farmer, Interchangeable White Ladies, Move to Tacoma, Crossing Division, Citizen Tacoma, What Say You, We Are Tacoma, Flounders B Team, and Taco Man.
This is Channel 253.
Get up.